Okay, what I'm going to move on to now, let's pretend that you have bought a universal router guide. So I've actually got 4 models, but this is the cheapest one, the medium density fiberboard box with the 2 self-centering vices, and this is the expensive one, 3 self-centering vices and all made of aluminium. So 70 years ago when I started to design this, I wanted a quality project, and look, it probably is a little bit over-engineered, the big one, but it is a SMIC unit. The little one does exactly the same, but just depends on your preference whether you like the medium density fiberboard or whether you like the aluminium. So with your show bag, I've set it up on OnGuard so students can do their WH&S. There's some booklets which outline some project ideas. There's 4 stops. There's a piece of brass that's 1/2 inch by 150. I'll explain all this in a second. There's some Allen keys. There's a 2-pin spanner. There's a couple of router cutters, 12mm and 19mm extension cutter, and a 1/2 round to go with both of them. And I've also made up a safe work method statement if you haven't got access to OnGuard. So when we look at this, you'll see the piece of brass is in the Makita router. It's in the collet, and it's also been clamped into the vices. So this becomes your T-bar to get your vices on center. So depending on what router you use, the brass goes into the collet of your router, and if we undo these screws here and push the rails hard up against the router that you're going to use, you want the router to slide. You don't want it to be tight, you don't want it to be loose. It doesn't take long to set that up. I've set the vices up on center. All you've got to do is adjust your rails up against the router that you're going to use. Okay, so if I have a look over here and I look at the vice, that's a vice that I've pulled out of a machine. The jaws have all been extruded. 90 by 90 is the maximum amount of timber size timber that can go in the universal router guide, and the steps on the jaws are to keep the timber high so that the router doesn't have to plunge the thinner the material gets. There's a grease nipple for maintenance. Everything runs on a linear slide. You've got a stainless steel left and right hand thread, and all of the components have all been machined up in brass. So, you know, when you wind the handle on the vices, they work really well. They're very SMIC. So, this little 2-pin spanner that you can see here. So if I zoom in, there's a little brass lug there that's got 2 holes in it. If you undo your 2 machine screws just slightly, and you put your 2-pin spanner into those 2 holes, you've got a micro adjustment. So if you've put initially, when you set it up, if you put your piece of timber in the vices and it doesn't machine on center, each vice has got that little brass lug, and you can actually wind it left or right to pull each of the jaws and get them on center. That micro adjustment is really important. One thing I will warn you about is sometimes if the timber's defected, like bows and springs and things, it's not going to sit and be machined properly, but you know, I can't cater for that. So that's just a little bit about purchasing Universal Router Guide and setting it up.